I was playing along with them to the very end. But when my ethic was already being tested, go lie to the people. And then that's where my ethics already said, no, it will not bend this way. The courage, it took a while for me to master it. But it's there. I've sort of crossed over it.
Less than 2 weeks after he first testified, Lozada said threats and intimidation tactics from government continue.
They're all over the place. They went to former employees that I've fired, former girlfriends, everything. They've been all over my hometown. What basically they're doing is buying off all the political restraints.
He and his family now live like fugitives, moving from place to place. His 5 children, ranging from 6 to 15 years old, have stopped going to school.
It's so tough. Meaning, I do not wish upon anyone else what I'm undergoing through right now. The institutional balances are not there. The judiciary is not a good refuge for people like me. The ombudsman. The institutions have been defiled by the political system of this country. In form, we might appear to be a democracy, but in practice, we're not.
Thousands of Filipinos agree. On February 17, nearly 60 former government officials, including cabinet secretaries, called on their former colleagues to join Lozada, tell the truth, and resign from what they called a morally bankrupt government. That followed the most incendiary words from the church so far.
An administration loses to its moral authority over its people when it fails in its fundamental duty to uphold the truth. When it is constituted by an ethos of falsehood.
At the center of the mass, the symbol of people power, former President Cory Aquino, who asked Filipinos to support Lozada. She compared the way he feels today with how she felt when she lost her husband, Ninoy.
Yun, nararamdaman mo na ba na hindi ka nag-iisa? Sabi niya, o, damdam na. Dahil ito po ang pagtatapat ko sa inyo. Nung napatay si Ninoy, kung hindi kayo nakiisa sa akin, siguro po ay hindi na niyo ako makikita dito sa ating bayan. Pero dahil sa pakikita niyo sa akin, gusto ko ay talagang tayong mga Pilipino ay magkaisa muli.
It was an all too familiar scene. The people, the emotion, the search for truth and justice. All signs pointing back to 1986. It's unclear exactly what will happen next, but it's no longer 1986, and 22 years later, we know exactly where people power has brought our nation. In 2001, Filipinos would again use people power to bring Gloria Arroyo to the presidency. Was it people power or just a power play? 20 years later, a Pulse Asia survey seems to back that idea, showing that only 36% of Filipinos now believe Marcos should have been removed by people power. What happened after 1986 to tarnish the memory of people power?
Sa paglilingkod sa bayan.
No one knows the effects of people power more than the son of Ferdinand Marcos. He says the fall from power began when his father agreed to hold snap elections.
I am ready to call a snap election.
Soon after the vote count started, his father was warned of an attempted coup, at least 10 days before anything happened. So they were prepared when soldiers began to move.
We knew exactly what was going to happen. We knew who were involved. We knew what their plans were. We were in contact with many of the... I laugh sometimes to see some of the officers who claimed to have been part of the coup. They were informing us as to what their next steps were going to be.
It was a tale of treachery and betrayal, and as Marcos tells it, of a president who refused to shoot his own people.
Officers from various branches of the military would come in and report to my father, and I would listen. I would sit in on those. And I remember very clearly. All the officers coming in and saying, do we move? Do we start now? Do we shoot? I said, no, no, no. He said, stop. There were big crowds. He said that people will get hurt. And he kept saying, then we can't do it. We won't do it. Then he said, stop, we'll do something else. We'll think of something else.
That's why I come here with your orders, so we can immediately fight them.
He says his father would have weathered the protests, but what turned the tide, he adds, is the betrayal of the Americans. When they boarded the helicopters to leave Malacanang, they thought they were going to Ilocos.
Clearly now, it was deception by the American government in that they sent helicopters to the park to take us first to Clark, and then in Clark, at 3 in the morning, I remember, the officers came in and said, we are under threat and they're coming to attack us and we need to move you to safety. And the Americans had backed the entire move, and it probably inspired the entire.
So people power is a power play more than anything.
Of course it's a power play. That's very clearly a power play.
Solita Monsod agrees people power has been used as a political tool in succeeding years, but says 1986 was different. She was one of the Filipinos who marched at EDSA.
The first people power was an act of desperation. People decided we're going to have the power within ourselves because all the institutions are not working. That's the perfect example of the people saying, hey, enough is enough.
I, Corazon Cojuangco Aquino.
A housewife defeated a dictator and a nation restored democracy. It was a moment of celebration and optimism. Monsod worked for President Aquino, heading NEDA, the National Economic and Development Authority. Her job was to weed out the bad from the good in government projects. More than 2 decades later, NEDA under Romulo Neri would recommend the approval of the $329 million ZTE deal.
The moment you start corrupting NEDA, you're dead. Then you're going to have the same situation as it was during Marcos's time, where Marcos would tell NEDA he wanted disapproved and NEDA would then justify it.
That kind of large-scale corruption, said Monsod, was impossible under President Aquino.
You could not corrupt her. I was with her, I served under her, and my husband served under her as commissioner on elections. Not once during his entire stint did she ever call him up. Not once.